things in the world don't always go well. And so, the elderly woman laughed. But just because of that, you can't keep your eyes down all the time. You have to face forward and keep walking. I also thought about living in such a way. My mother passed away due to an illness. That happened a year ago. As a fresh first-year high school student, I was naturally shocked. However, my mother had been fighting the illness for several years, so, to be honest, I prepared myself to some extent. At home, I learned household chores while taking care of her, and when she was hospitalized, I visited her every day. Looking back now, I believe that by doing so, I was cherishing the limited time I had left with my mother. But my father was different. He was naturally someone who didn't often come home due to being busy with work. Certainly, work is important, and there are also expenses to consider, such as my mother's hospitalization costs and daily living expenses. However, seeing my father not coming to visit my hospitalized mother and going to work even on what should have been his days off, I felt an indescribable loneliness. Undersea, after my mother's death, my father went through the funeral without shedding a single tear and quickly returned to his previous routine. I couldn't help but feel frustrated and disappointed by that. My father became even more absorbed in his work than before, and the days without seeing his face became more frequent. And conversations at home became almost non-existent, and returning to an empty house became a daily occurrence for me. As that kind of life continued, one day, about a year had passed. "Are you going to remarry?" My father, who rarely came home early, suddenly mentioned that he was planning to remarry soon. The person he was considering marrying was one of his subordinates at work, but I couldn't accept it right away. But it's only been a year since Mom passed away, right? I made the argument that there was no need to hurry like that, but my father didn't listen to me. Well, mourning period is already over. Besides, it wouldn't be good for you to keep dragging on about the person who passed away forever. Dad, I have little experience in marriage, let alone romantic relationships, but I wonder if it is possible to marry someone after only a few months of dating. Furthermore, there are still things that concern me. No, it's nothing. However, I swallowed my words and remained silent. There's no point in saying it because my mother passed away. In this way, my father remarried. It's the woman who became my stepmother was about a decade younger than my father and mother. She had a preference for flashy attire. I couldn't bring myself to like this person, who was the complete opposite of my quiet and conservative mother. From the beginning, it seemed that they had little interest in me, and as a result, we continued to live under the same roof, but pass each other by day after day. My father, perhaps influenced by her, gradually lost interest in me, and I could sense it. Just with the disappearance of conversations, my father and stepmother began eating out more frequently, while I spent my days doing household chores for myself. I would come home from school, study, do household chores, and then go to sleep. It was a repetitive cycle. Since I was already busy taking care of my mother and doing household chores, I had very few friends to play with outside. As a result, going to school became increasingly difficult and burdensome for me. And so on a certain day, when the summer of my second year in high school was coming to an end, I was invited by a male classmate to go to a festival. The person who invited me was Tom, who was in the same class as me back in the second year of middle school. He was an energetic member of the track and field club, although his grades were average at best. He is also cheerful and has a lot of friends, but his high energy sometimes leads to him being reprimanded by teachers. Since we didn't interact much, I couldn't understand why I was invited by him. I did help him with some studying back in middle school, but that was the extent of our interaction. "Are we going with everyone?" When I asked him directly, he blushed slightly and made excuses like, "It's not that, but..." So, does this mean that I was being asked out on a date, which could potentially be the beginning of a romantic relationship? Is it possible for a guy to ask a girl out on a date, even if they don't usually interact much or have a close relationship? Is it even enjoyable for someone like Tom, who doesn't usually engage in many conversations, to ask out a girl like me, who is rather introverted and not particularly outgoing? Various thoughts float in my mind. In the first place, due to the circumstances involving my mother, father, and stepmother, I gradually lost interest in romantic relationships and dating without even realizing it. Even though my father and mother were initially attracted to each other and got married, I couldn't help but wonder if it was normal for someone to quickly move on to someone else after the loss of a loved one. Sure, why not? Let's go to the festival. Nevertheless, I accepted Tom's invitation. Actually, there is a reason behind my decision. It's because my mother, before she passed away, gave me a traditional dress to keep. "Hey, Mom, I want this dress." There was a time when my mother was still healthy, and I saw her in that dress. It was then that I said those words. "But it's still too big for you, isn't it?" My mother looked troubled as she said that, but I was really fond of the flower pattern on it. In the end, we made a promise that when I grew old enough to fit into that dress, we would wear it together and go out somewhere. The promise was never fulfilled, but I at least wanted to try wearing that dress, even if it was just me. Tom's invitation was a good opportunity for that. The day. I'm going to the festival that day, so I'll be coming home late. I decided to inform my father, just in case, and I told him when he returned home before my bedtime. My father responded curtly, "Oh, all right. Isn't it strange that a father wouldn't be concerned about his teenage daughter going out late at night, asking who she's going with or what time she'll be back?" By the way, I was thinking of wearing the dress Mom had in the closet. Would it be okay to wear it? My father was aware that it was my mother's dress, but I insisted that she had given it to me and made sure it wasn't disposed of. "Please do as you like." Without even looking at my face, my father responded. And just like that, my father quickly headed to the living room with my stepmother. I watched them leave and then headed to my own room, staying there alone. It is like a cherished keepsake of my mother's. When I tried it on in front of the mirror, I realized that I had grown to the perfect size to wear that dress without even knowing. In a sudden moment, words slipped out of my mouth, unintentionally. Clearly, those are the words of someone who has no interest in me. Oh, what should I do? I can't even cry anymore, Mom. On the day of the festival, I gave a brief greeting to my father and stepmother before leaving the house. I guess can enjoy yourself. Neither of them said anything about me wearing the dress. But with a sigh, I left the house. In the chat we had the day before, it was Hicham, and I decided to grab a bite to eat before heading to the festival. I thought it might be more festive to eat at the food truck once we got to the venue. At a diner instead, he said, "A food truck sounds fun, but we wouldn't want to risk getting your dress dirty." At Terry, I hadn't thought of him as someone who could be so considerate, so I was a bit surprised. Tom's suggestion made sense, so I decided to go along with it. And now, I'm waiting for Tom near the entrance of the diner. But Tom hasn't appeared even though it's already past the scheduled meeting time. Did I make a mistake with the timing? Oh, it's a message from Tom? I suddenly took out my smartphone and noticed that I had received an email without realizing it, and not just one, but multiple messages. The first one was about 2 hours ago. Since I have very few friends who would text me, I don't have a habit of checking my phone. I didn't even notice it at all. Perhaps it's a message about a change in the meeting time or a cancellation due to some inconvenience. Since I hadn't left home 2 hours ago, I thought it was possible that there could be such a message, so I quickly skimmed through the emails. Okay, let's see. As I was reading it, Tom just showed up right then. I was good. Later, I realized that he'd sent me a message informing me that he would be about 30 minutes late. As to find that fact, it meant that he arrived about 5 minutes before our updated meeting time. Sorry for making you wait. Although he apologized, that wasn't the problem. The problem was that behind Tom, there were his 2 younger siblings and their guardian accompanying them. I'm sorry, but younger siblings and grandmother really wanted to come along. They'll just eat and then go home, he said. I looked at the person standing behind Tom once again upon hearing his words. When I checked the message again, it did mention that his younger siblings and grandmother were interested in having dinner together. The beautiful woman gracefully wearing a dress. That was the impression of the grandmother. Honestly, I thought she was Tom's mother. She had a calm smile and appeared to be a kind-hearted person. She looked somewhat like my deceased mother. However, as soon as the grandmother saw me, her expression immediately turned stern. You come here for a moment. Fixed with a curt remark, the grandmother took hold of my hand and quickly entered the diner. Thomas, bring them and find us a table, she told Tom and pulled me along with her. Tom obediently followed without showing any signs of surprise. My mind was still trying to process the sudden turn of events. And I found myself thinking that Tom's real name actually is Thomas. The place the grandmother took me to was the restroom of the diner. There was a makeshift fitting space for changing clothes, and the grandmother made me stand there. Well, see, I was still taken aback and remained silent, unable to find the right words to say. Then the grandmother looked me in the eye and gave me a toothy smile. "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have surprised you." Feeling relieved by her smile, I finally found my voice and spoke. "Excuse me, ma'am. Linda, it's Linda. 하긴 쓰죽소. I'm not even in my 60s yet, but being treated like an old lady is unbearable." "What's your name?" "I'm Susan." As I thought to myself that Linda's hearty laughter didn't resemble my mother's, she asked me a question with a serious expression. "Susan, who did you learn how to wear this dress from?" I dressed by myself, looking up how to wear it on the internet. Upon hearing my response, Linda seemed to understand. "I see. You know your way of wearing it is a little off. It's a simple fix, so I'll help you adjust it." Linda unbuckled the belt and skillfully and efficiently adjusted my dress. It seems like the left and right sides are switched. Acoptions Wheatnoyer, it's a common mistake beginners make, but this way it looks like the way men wear it. "Oh, I see. I used my phone screen as a reference while wearing it. So there's also a symbolic meaning behind the left and right being switched." "Yeah. This mistake is quite common and not a big deal." But after finishing the adjustments, Linda looked into my eyes again. "When you left the house, did anyone from your family say anything when they saw you wearing this?" I was shocked. This dress is really beautiful. If they went through the trouble of dressing a child in such a nice piece, they wouldn't have missed a mistake like this. That was the reason behind Linda's stern expression. Action, I see. A typical parent would usually correct their child's dressing before they face any embarrassment. But before leaving the house today, I spoke to both my father and stepmother. Both of them must have seen me in my dress. "I'm sorry. It's okay if it's just me alone. If I had gone to the festival like this, I would have embarrassed not only myself, but also Tom, who invited me." Overwhelmed with embarrassment. With embarrassment, tears welled up in my eyes. "You don't have to apologize. Susan, I come to think of it, it had been a while since someone called me by my name. But, is there something difficult happening at home?" "Yes," nodding repeatedly like a small child. I began to tell Linda about everything that had happened over the past year. About my mother's passing, and my father's remarriage. How my stepmother and father didn't show any interest in me, and the fact that I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I've been wondering if maybe, even while my mother was still alive, my current stepmother was already with my dad. Since the day my father mentioned remarrying, I couldn't shake off that thought from my mind. My mother worried about me and my father until the very end. Linda gently rubbed my head and gave me a tight hug. I hadn't received such affection from anyone for many years. I had thought of myself as a mature adult. Although I was still in high school, I believed that I was capable of handling household chores and studying on my own after losing my mother. I saw myself as an independent adult. I convinced myself that I became an adult earlier than others due to my mother's death. But I was wrong. Action, I was just a child who didn't know what I was anxious about or whom to talk to about it. Pichuli other people, I was just a child who wanted a place where I could feel safe and secure, a child who cried seeking comfort. After waiting for me to calm down, Linda led me to the table where Tom was waiting. Tom and his brothers had already started eating, and when I sat down at the table, he said, "I'm glad you seem to have calmed down." You actually intended to bring Linda along from the beginning, didn't you? As I responded, "Yeah, you helped me with studying for the tests back in middle school. Remember?" I really appreciated that. He said without any remorse, which made me chuckle a bit. My grandma is strangely good at taking care of others, you know? She often listens to people's problems and offers advice, so I thought she might be able to help somehow. I see. Thanks a lot. I'm sure Tom was concerned when we reunited in high school and saw how much I had changed since our middle school days. I thought that was a kind thing to do. I was already preoccupied with my own situation. While eating, Linda told me, "My family is from a rural farming background. When I was a child, if someone was in trouble, we all looked after them together." When Linda mentioned her childhood, it would be around 50 years ago, roughly speaking. "So, Susan, if your home situation becomes too difficult, you can always come to my place." Absolutely. Most likely. Linda doesn't want me to hold back in such situations. I thought so too, so I responded honestly. Saying so, Linda laughed. I nodded firmly in agreement as well. I also wanted to live like Linda, but first I needed to start with appearances. When we left the diner, it was already time for the festival to begin. Well then, old folks like me will head back home. As Linda started to leave with Tom's younger brothers, I couldn't help but stop her. "Let's go to the festival together." "Linda!" Upon hearing my words, Linda gave a wry smile. "Is it okay? It's supposed to be your date, isn't it?" Responding to teasing from Linda, Tom laughed and replied, "It's not a date. She wants to go with you, so why not join us?" Encouraged by Tom's words, I approached Linda and gently took her beautiful hand. "It's fine, isn't it?" "Linda? Well, can't be helped." As Linda let out a sigh, both Tom and I burst into laughter together. When I return home, I will be faced with the same daily routine with my father and stepmother, and none of my problems has been solved yet. But it's okay today. Let's leave tomorrow for tomorrow and give it my best shot then. If that doesn't work, let's find someone else's advice again. I thought of myself as childish, but I found it comforting to see myself that way. While thinking about such things, I held hands with Linda and Tom and hurried to the festival. As I thought to myself, tomorrow is another day.